Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and you are now here at UFO Entity Enigma. Today, we will be focusing on a wonderful book, Mimics, The Others Among Us, which takes a look at the reality of not only the UFO phenomenon, but the higher being phenomenon. And I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody's thoughts on this particular show. We have Tim Swartz, the one and only Tim Swartz, who is going to be speaking as a writer and a researcher and one of the geniuses behind Zontar Press. We have Paul, and he is going to be speaking as one of the contributors to this wonderful volume. We have Nick, who you guys know from before. He's the director of the Disclosure Network in New York. We have Setna of Khemet, who is our Egyptian high priest. And we have Marc and Phyllis, who are wanderers and walk-ins, and they speak directly from the higher powers. So we should have a really interesting show tonight. Tim, I'm impressed by this book. Not that I haven't been impressed by your past books, whether I've contributed to them or not, but this one is phenomenally well thought out and opens up doors to a lot of speculative conversations. Thank you for publishing it.
Oh, well, my pleasure, Hercules, and thank you for having this discussion today about this book. It's we had a lot of really good contributors, yourself included. You've got a really excellent chapter. We've with tonight's show, we've got Paul Dale Roberts, who contributed several stories to this book, and along with Sean Castile, who wrote a number of really excellent chapters. And we really need to applaud Sean because he is also our proofreader, grammar checker, and just the guy who really is responsible for trying to get this book to look and read as professional as we can, because when I get writing, then it's sometimes it's like chicken scratches. So I don't envy Sean the task of having to go through my material and fix my grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes, and stuff like that. So again, thanks to Sean and yourself and Paul and Scott Corrales and Gene Steinberg and others who contributed to this book.
What gave you the idea for this book? What inspired you to pick this particular topic? Because it's an important one. And the phenomenon that we now view as UFO entity enigmas, in previous ages, as you state on the cover brilliantly and throughout the book, these beings, these invisible and enigmatic beings, were often perceived as gods. They've been not only behind our sacred literature, but our folk tales. And they've been viewed in a variety of ways throughout history, but they've always been an active part of our evolution here on the planet. And one of the things I found in my investigations is that we often miss the mark because we buy into a particular way of looking at things, and then the entity enigma frames itself in such a way where it can communicate us through our beliefs. So it'll reinforce whatever beliefs we have, which diverts attention away from how they operate throughout time and throughout the planet. So I'm glad that you finally focused on that aspect of the phenomenon, because it's very important to gaining a greater insight.
Yeah, that's very well put, Hercules. And I have to admit, the concept of mimics, the others among us, can be rather difficult to describe. And one of the reasons is because they have presented themselves to us throughout history in just all kinds of different forms. As you stated, at one point, um, they emerged as, say, like, gods or angels or demons or other divine figures, and still do so. Right now in modern times, um, it's the UFO phenomena has really kind of glommed onto it. But what I try to point out is that UFOs, when it comes to the others, I mean, that it's not the only game in town, and never has been the only game in town. But probably my original idea for this came from a book that was written by John Keel way back way back in the day. And I found this book. It was called Our Haunted Planet in a at a drugstore. And this was a time when you could actually go to the drugstore and buy rather inexpensive paperback books dealing with UFOs and the paranormal and other nonfiction type of subjects. And my first exposure to a lot of people like John Keel and Brad Steiger and others came from these paperback books that I found at my local bookstore. But in Our Haunted Planet, there is a section that is called Mimics of Man. And John really he doesn't go very far into that particular subject. He just actually uses it as a jumping off point to talk about other things. But John suggested that there could be beings or entities, and his initial concept was like, physical beings of that look like human and act like humans, but they're not humans. They're mimics, and they live among us, probably keeping themselves pretty much out of the way, living in big cities where they're not noticed, kind of recluses or hermits, and suggests that they could actually be a completely different species that just looks like us for whatever reason. And in the book, I go into the idea that in nature, mimicry is used quite often in the animal kingdom, usually in two forms. Either predators use mimicry in order to get close to their prey, or prey uses mimicry so they don't get eaten by the predators. So it's interesting to think we have long since grown accustomed to being at the top of the food chain. And, is there a possibility that there is another creature that preys on us, living among us? That part is just speculation. But again, it's like I said at the beginning of my diatribe here, that the subject, there are so many different aspects of it in play that you don't want to get too focused on one or the other, because all of the things that we discuss in the book about the others is a very real possibility. So we could be dealing with actually physical things that look like humans, maybe distantly related to us. That's something that we go into quite often, that these things could actually be, say, like a cousin species that developed right alongside with us, but chose, in order not to become extinct like some of our other cousin species, but instead chose to go undercover, either moving underground, or, at first moving out into the desert or the mountains and eventually underground or under the oceans, or, like Keel suggested, maybe a few of them actually, continue to live among us. But, the other aspect of this mystery is that not only do we seem to have physical creatures that look human, but there's a paranormal aspect to it as well. And, and again, we're left to wonder whether or not, do all of these things have paranormal abilities? Some of them do, some of them don't. I don't know. That's the great mystery about all of this. And it really makes for interesting research and reading, because if you go and look at paranormal phenomena, UFO phenomena, all kinds of different aspects of this weird stuff that all of us like to research, you'll find that the human looking entity plays such a predominant role in all of this, going all the way back to the ancient mythologies, the Greek gods, the other gods and devils and angels and what have you, to the fairies and elementals and the good people that seemingly lived alongside humanity, but keeping themselves apart for whatever reasons. So it's a fascinating discussion, and even now, as I'm trying to discuss this book with you, it can be very confounding, because again, there are so many different aspects to it. But I think the main point is that there are other beings, other entities that live among us, can make themselves visible to us when they want to. When they don't want to, they're not seen. There are others of the others that seem to be physical and superficially look like people, but anyone who has come into contact with them walk away left with the impression that what they interacted with was definitely not human. That people are often left with the feeling that they have interacted with something. A lot of people describe them as not real. They don't look real. They didn't act normal. There's just something odd about them a lot of times. And we go into the idea of what's called the uncanny valley, which
I like that
is,
term.
I'm sorry.
I like that term.
Well, the uncanny valley was, that concept came up when people or scientists were working to develop robots, and working hard to get them looking as human looking as possible. But there comes to a point when they become too human looking, and it creates a kind of an unconscious disturbing feeling in people when they see these things. One good example that I like to give is some of these animated movies that have come out recently. The one that I think of the most is The Polar Express. All right. The animation is so excellent in that movie. However, the people in it, there's just something not quite right. They're just a little too close to looking human, but then again, not enough. So people who watched that cartoon, even though they enjoyed it, they were left kind of disturbed. by how the characters in this movie looked. And we get that a lot with people who have had interactions with these things. And so, and I'll use examples of, say, like like the Men in Black, or other people who, or other things who seem to be playing kind of a Men in Black type of role, and not the movie Men in Black, but the more traditional ufology Men in Black. And gosh, so many times people have described these things as being robotic like, or their skin looked almost like plastic, and a number of times people reported that these things were wearing makeup, and didn't know how to do very simple things. Several cases, these others were offered, say, like drinks or food. One person offered a person who was disguised as an Air Force lieutenant who came to visit their house after a UFO sighting, and this lieutenant had no idea how to eat Jello and tried to drink it. Right, and the woman had to show him how to use a spoon to eat this Jello, and we see that time and time again, with these things, that they're able to superficially look like people and act like us, but not completely. And so, I mean, it's interesting, and and I'll tell you this little story before I'll stop, if anybody wants to ask a question. My wife was just recently telling one of her coworkers about this book, and this person is a gamer, and he said it sounded to him like these things were, oh no, I'm not gonna, what was the name of them?
NPCs, non-player characters.
Yeah, non-player characters. There's another name, like Freeman, or there's actually a movie that came out a couple of years ago with Ryan Reynolds, where he was a character, a background character in the video game, and this person said that these things almost sound like background characters in video games. The only difference is that these things interact with us for whatever reason. They will show up under weird circumstances, say bizarre things, act weird, and then disappear, leaving the people who have had the interactions with them just totally befuddled on what exactly happened to them. So, okay, I'll stop now if anybody has a question before I
No,
dig myself any deeper into a hole.
that you didn't dig yourself into a hole. You opened up a door. In my investigations, and my particular contribution was to basically show that these beings are very visible in their invisible type of way. And I looked at Greek mythology. In the esoteric traditions of the Greeks, there are books that talk about this, and they've always been in print because they're the domain of scholars. But if you don't want to go there, you can just go to Greek mythology, which is something that's available to even children, and it gives you the answers right there. These beings, which let's just call the Olympians into focus. These beings are beings of light. And these beings can appear as anyone and as anything. They're shapeshifters, and they can look like whatever they need to look like to communicate with us. And they are like us in very many ways. If you look at the tales of the Greek gods, they're very human in how they interact with each other and with humanity, and that they are able to mate with us and have relationships with us. They're able to produce offspring, and that they don't produce offspring for no reason. They have a reason for producing offspring. And let's take Hercules from myth as an example. He was born into a line where Zeus had already mixed himself with his grandfather, Perseus. And so Hercules was of the line of Perseus, which was already a Zeus created line, because he was needed to help the gods in the Gigantomachia, or the war against the giants who arose to try to displace the gods. And Zeus makes it very clear that Hercules was deliberately designed to serve a specific purpose. So this is it. These are in the stories that are there for the consumption of children, and it gives you all the answers there. And there are scholarly books that'll give you the details and expand upon what I've just enumerated. So these beings are also said to take different guises in other cultures. In Greek mythology, it was when Typhon invaded Olympus, the Olympians fled to Egypt, and they wore masks, and it explains who's who behind the masks, and they became the Egyptian gods. And I know Setna will give us a different view of this, but in the Greek literature,
Oh, yeah.
That's how they explain it. So Zeus is Ammon, and some of the other goddesses like Aphrodite was Hathor. And so it tells you that these are the same beings behind different cultural guises. And I found in my own explorations that playing hide and seek with these beings, there are certain things, like usually emblems, that lead you to the possibility of their identity. And if you follow the emblems long enough, you'll see that it is the same being behind a different cultural mask. One of the things that makes it challenging is that the cultural mask has an identity and an individuality of its own. So even though it's true that there's something greater behind the mask itself is a person, as we understand the term, and can be treated as a separate personage and interacted with as something separate. So for instance, Thor is not the same as Melkart, is not the same as Hercules, is not the same as Heracles, but he is. So a step further, it's the same being that you're interacting with, but on the cultural level, it's a being on a certain level that you're interacting with. And I don't want to share everything I wrote in the book. I want people to buy the book and read it for themselves. But generally, that was my contribution to that conversation, to that line of thought. And Paul, I'm dying for you to share your contributions and your thoughts on this topic as well.
Well, the book is absolutely amazing. I mean,
yes,
Tim and everybody who brought something to this book covered everything. I mean, you go into the book, you see things about shapeshifters, selkies, fairies, tulpa, Slenderman's in that baby, living ghosts, black-eyed kids, doppelgangers, Nordics, who look very similar to humans. And so with all this information, I mean, when I was sitting there reading this book, it was like reading a blockbuster movie. I mean, I felt like I was in a movie theater just watching all this stuff. And one of the things that really got to me is a drawing in there. It was a drawing by Adrian Hicks in 2004. And it was a sighting that he had of an alien girl ballerina. Well, she looked like a ballerina, her outfit and everything else. And it was just a striking drawing. And this is a type of book, I mean, mimics, but also too, Tim refers to all these type of entities that mimic man as the others. And that in itself, I mean, this is good material for a great movie. And if it ever became a movie, it really would open up the eyes to a lot of people. They would just see there's so much supernatural stuff going on this haunted earth. I love this book. It's a good book.
Yeah, it's a phenomenally awesome book, and everybody in it contributed. It's like each chapter was the facet of a gem. And,
yeah.
a particular area, and then taken all together, it was like looking at a brilliantly cut gem or diamond, where all the different facets together work together. There was a great synergy, and I think it's a very brilliant book, and that it's one of the necessary books to study if you're an investigator or just curious about this phenomena of the others. And it says in the Chaldean oracles, and again, going to ancient books, Hecate states that they look like what we expect them to look like. And I will tell you, earlier in my investigations, it seemed like there was a deception going on. And I hear that sentiment echoed in a lot of the literature, that somehow we're being deceived because they appear in different guises. But then I figured out that we do the same thing. We speak from different platforms when we're interacting with people, sometimes from a personal standpoint, sometimes from a professional standpoint, sometimes from a spiritual standpoint. So we too wear different masks when we need to communicate with people, and they're shapeshifters, so they can actually change how they view and how they interact. And it's a communication device. And once you get past that suspicion, it's brilliant how they find ways of interacting with us, helping us gain insight. To me personally, and this is just my particular perspective, one of the things that the UFO Enigma does is it breaks our concept of reality and shows us that the way we've been conditioned to view the world might not necessarily be correct, because what we observe and what's being described violates our reality. So maybe our reality is not something we should hold on to. Maybe we should open up our eyes and our minds to greater concepts of what this is all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I should point out that Paul had an excellent chapter dealing with a haunting situation that involved doppelganger types of situations, where the occupants of the house had no idea whether or not what they were seeing was an actual person or the ghost disguising itself as this person. And that's something that that you find quite often, throughout this book, and with stories like this, is that when you're dealing with these things on the paranormal level, they look just absolutely physical. I mean, you think of ghosts as being like you see in the traditional Hollywood movies, transparent and and cloudy looking and floating down the hallway, weeping and carrying candles and stuff. No, I mean, these things look like that you could, and maybe you could, I don't know if anybody's attempted it, that you could reach out and actually touch them, shake their hands, talk with them, and up to the point when they disappear, you can't tell the difference between them and a regular human being.
And Tim, I got to tell you, you're talking about the Rosie case in Sacramento, where she would go into this room and she would see her daughter and interact with her daughter, come out of the room, and then go into the kitchen, and there's her daughter. The entity would actually look like her daughter. And then the entity changed around and started looking exactly like Rosie, the mother. And the daughter would see this. It was just so bizarre. And one of the strangest cases of a doppelganger that really blew me away and was this lady who was waiting at a bus stop, and she saw this bus going by, and on the last window she saw herself, and she was like stunned. It was her looking at her. It was just mind blown. And then just 1 week later, her mother passed away. So she felt like by seeing her doppelganger that she was cursed. And these type of mimic type entities, I mean, they're all around us. Even like the author of The Shadow, his family and friends would come to his home, and they would see this guy with a long nose. He had his red scarf. He had a long brim hat. They were describing the shadow, and it was a tulpa. The author was thinking so much of his creation that it actually manifested in his home. So yeah, and you just get one story after another in your book, mimics, and you have a lot of great minds that put all these stories together. factual stories are happening all over the world.
And tulpas and egregores, as they're sometimes called, people don't realize how big an effect they've had on our culture. I don't know if any of you have heard of Conan the Barbarian. There was a movie starring Arnold Swartz.
Of course.
And Robert E.
Yep.
Howard wrote a bunch of books. There were Marvel comics and so forth. The author of Conan the Barbarian, Robert E. Howard, was going through a creative dry spell. And then Conan the Barbarian appeared to him physically and started threatening him into writing his stories down. So the first Conan the Barbarian stories were written under duress by a tulpa or an egregore that was dictating them. And Conan outlived his creator and still exists to this day. Sherlock Holmes, Tarzan, these are some other examples. These are literary creations that took on a life of their own and outlived their creators and still exist to this day. So tulpas are very powerful things, and they can be created. The Tibetans and occult lodges have left a lot of literature and a lot of information on creating such beings and the necessity of dissolving them if they become too powerful.
Tulpas, they really, I mean, there's something else. I mean, we've actually investigated a few cases where regarded tulpas, but one of the things like in mimics that you'll find in there is about stories about the black-eyed kids. And one of my cases in Sacramento was a lady who said that these two boys that are kind of disheveled, they would knock on her door wanting to use her telephone. And she goes, "No, I'm not letting you guys in my house." And she noticed that their eyes were pure black. And the next day, they knock on the door. "Ma'am, can we use your telephone? We just want to use your telephone." No, you can't. You cannot come into this house. And the strangest thing that she told us was she was driving down the road. She saw the two black-eyed kids hanging by a tree. She gets about 10 miles down the road on the freeway. She exits, and there's those black-eyed kids somehow were right there. Like they teleported from where they were standing before, and now they're in another location 10 miles away. Well, finally, they stopped coming around. But then 1 month later, this family moves into the house next door, and their two kids looked like the black-eyed kids, except they had normal eyes.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a bizarre case that I had.
That is an awesome case. I will share one of my own before we get to our panelists with their questions or their comments or observations. The concept of doppelgangers to come up. And that is a little bit more complicated. I had a doppelganger experience. I was invited to an event and I really wanted to go, but I couldn't. I was living in New York City at the time. The event was in Jersey, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but I couldn't attend, but I really, really wanted to. Years later, I thought about the event and I had memories of this event that I know I didn't go to. So I started contacting people who were at the event, and half of them remember me being there, and half of them said, "No, you weren't able to go, and you were disappointed that you weren't able to go, and you left a message for people." Now, the memories that I have of going to the event that I didn't go to match the memories of the people who remember me being there, but not the memories of the people who said that, "No, you couldn't come and you were disappointed." And so I don't know how to explain that, but I seem to have gone and not gone to this event. And depending on who you talk to, they'll swear up and down that I was there or I wasn't there.
That sounds like the doppelganger
Yeah.
who goes to
I
do
can
the thing you
explain
don't
this.
want or can't do.
I can explain this.
Oh, awesome. Setna of Khemet, I pass the baton to you.
Very good. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is called a bilocation Hercules. I've done it myself. When I was about 15, I was in Florida at my grandparents' house, And my best friend and his sister and several other neighbors saw me walk through his gate. And we were best friends. I was at that house every single day. And so his sister Lisa said to me, Michael, I was just talking to you yesterday in the yard, and you're in Florida. I said, well, yeah, but I was thinking about being with you people. So what you do is you're projecting that energy, and if you're strong enough, and of course you are, and I am, you can put that energy form out where you're actually creating a physical entity, your own entity. It's like a kind of like beaming yourself in, as like Star Trek would say, and you're bringing yourself into that place, that phase. I've done it. You're doing it subconsciously. I've been able to master it and do it consciously. So I can, they say you can't be in two places at once. Try me.
Thank you very much, Setna.
You're welcome.
Marc and Phyllis, who's invisible, do you have anything you'd like to add to or ask about this topic?
Oh, you're right, Michael, you're right. It's also by location. And, but also the doppelganger will do that and go out.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Like Padre Pio would bilocate, be in Italy, but also be in like Turkey, at somebody's funeral or something.
Terrible.
I was going to ask you, Hercules and everybody, how did you spell that word, tulpa? Is it T-O-U or T-O-L?
T-U-L-P-A. It pops up in literature about Tibet. And occult lodges create entities of all sorts, or give birth to entities of all sorts to perform a particular function.
Mm-hmm.
So in the literature about the tulpas, it's the same type. They have their own procedure for creating a tulpa. And basically the tulpa takes on a certain type of reality and gains an individuality. And once it gains an individuality, and it's no longer an imaginal construct, it sometimes will start fighting against the people who created it, or start operating in opposition to the purpose that it was initially given. But they're very, very real.
Don't they have a way of dissipating them though when their job was done?
Yes, some people dissipate them, some people just let them go free, that basically you're an entity now, and go off and perceive your identity and your destiny on your own, because there's something that's been created.
Yeah.
Some of the literature about spirits, the spirits express it themselves by saying that they're either the product of the mind or the body. So they might have been somebody who existed before, they're a product of the body, or they might have been something that was created and they were products of the mind. And they're in this shadowy spirit realm that some people spend time in after they were born into this world and they're no longer in it. So two types of spirits exist in the shadow place and can interact from there.
I heard a story a long time ago, maybe 30 years or more. I've told it a couple times some places, but it was about a woman who was leaving her house. She lived alone, but she had a house on a property. And it's like a puka, like Harvey.
Yeah.
That's when I heard tulpa, I was thinking of the puka, because she imagined something like a llama or a Bigfoot. It was something big, not a llama. Something that could be scary. And she said, watch my house when I'm gone. I live in a bad neighborhood. Watch my house. And she kept concentrating on this image. And when she left, she found out later from neighbors, people had come by and they were trying to rip off the house. Well, something scared them. And it was in the front door, outside the yard. And it chased them away, and they were frightened what it was. Well, that was one. That was like a puka. And she asked it to leave and, just dissipate or go away into the frequencies again. Then there was another one where a lady asked to protect her house, but she asked for protection from the angelic realm. And she went away. And I think Hercules and Nick, I think I told the story a long time ago, but she goes away and she comes back to find out that from the neighbors and the police, there was a sign or something that these guys in a car came by the neighborhood, and they were going through the neighborhood trying to steal things and break into houses. Well, what was happening is the cops brought the guys to her house, and they said, She had a beautiful house, right? And they said, well, look, you're trying to hit all the houses on this neighborhood. Why didn't you hit the house on the corner, the big house here? And they went, there was no house there. It was a lot.
Oh,
That's how
wow.
they protected her.
Oh,
And they were shocked. They couldn't believe it. They were saying, this isn't the house, but this wasn't here. Well, this can't be the same. And they said, yes, it is. So she was saying what she did. So that was to give, and there's probably an Angels magazine or book of how they will protect if you ask them to come in, and they put such a site that it was just a blank lot to them with a fence.
Yeah,
But that-
reality is more dreamlike than we expect. I do frequent reality checks, usually with Mandela effect type of things.
Oh, yeah.
And our world seems to change. One of the things I focus on is Edgar Cayce's Atlantis. Did it or didn't it rise off the coast of Bimini? And sometimes if you look, you'll find things that tell you that it never rose and it kind of discredited what Edgar Cayce had to say. And then other times there's information on YouTube and the internet where it did appear and so forth. And then there's times when it's inconclusive. But that's one of the things I check when to see if we're the same reality. But yes, what you're saying is very true. I tried that once. I had a statue of a food dog, which is kind of like a lion dog.
Yeah.
It's found in front of Chinese restaurants sometimes.
Yeah. It's
So
great.
I used Viking runes to come up with a name for it, and each of the runes has like a sound. It's like a letter, but it represents a certain spiritual energy. So I took the energies that I wanted in the statue and I made a name from it. I painted them in gold, and I gave it the intent of protecting my apartment, because at that point I wasn't living in a really great neighborhood and I could feel negativity. So one day I came home and that statue had kind of like exploded. So I think it fought something and kind of lost, but it did fight something. And then the negativity, I couldn't feel the negativity anymore. So
I gotta tell you guys, I knew Charles Berlitz like 1980, whatever,
uh-huh.
on the Candy Jones show with him. That was John Nebel, his wife, and we were talking in the green room, and he knew about my experience with UFOs, etc., and nature, everything. We talked about nature spirits, and he said he wrote the book on the Bimini. Triangle stuff, and he wrote about Bimini. He was telling me about Bimini back then and how he's got these guys who he's working with to go dive, and they saw these different patterns down there. And he was the one who was mentioning that about what Mark, he goes, do you think this was Atlantis? I said, well, yeah, it was all part of it. It's pieces of it sunk, came and kept sinking. So Cuba's still left over. They're sunken and came up again.
Bermuda.
I just found that fascinating because he was a really interesting guy. He told about the Philadelphia experiment.
Mhm.
Interviewed all these people down south, all the guys,
Max
the
time.
sailors, and he said he went into the restaurants or places they were at the bars, and he interviewed the people in the towns, how they were there witnessing the guys fighting the sailors after the Philadelphia experiment. They were fighting. They would dematerialize and pop on another area of the room, rolling on the floor, fighting still, then pop off again, dematerialize, pop over there, throwing a chair. And people were like freaking out, like, what the heck? But he was saying that's how they got, their energy fields got disturbed. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But what I want to say is everything that you guys have written is fascinating because I've studied stuff like that, but I just didn't know the Tulpa name. And the black-eyed kids, there's some of them, they're saying they're not all the black-eyed kids that are the other dimensional kids, but there's actually kids that are into Wicca that will put on these black contacts over their whole eyes that they get. And they want to pretend they're the black-eyed kids to scare people. But we know about the black-eyed kids trying to get into your house, and they're not nice all the time. They're negative beings that are trying to get energy and come in. So if the person lets them in, watch out. A lady had two of them come in her car, little kids. They just opened their doors because that's why you always lock your doors. Make sure you get in, lock them. She got in her car, was sitting down, didn't lock her doors yet. They came in both sides of her car, sat in the back seat, and asked to take them to her house so they can make phone calls. Or do you have a cell phone? And she's going, no. And then she saw their eyes because they kept doing this look down thing. She managed to get them out of the car. I think she actually got out of the car to lure them to get out of the car and say, well, let's go over here. I'll take you over to a phone. And they didn't want that. So they're trying to get into the house. And I think they're doing an energy thing where they want to get in. And but Hercules, everybody, we're on a planet that's physical here for us, right?
For
There's
us, yeah.
dimensional planes and levels.
Depends where you are.
And we're, right, where are we? And we're on this levels of different frequencies that we're intermingling with. And so these beings like we're talking about, like the Men in Black, who I've had friends who had encounters with them, they all act like Tim was saying, very strange, very robotic, and very just weird. And you remember how we might be sensing a being that has no real soul. So we feel weird about it. And like Tim mentioned about the movies with the cartoons, it gives you a weird vibe when you watch them. And it's like you're not seeing something real, mimicking again, right? If it's not real, but it's cartoony to look real. And so what we're sensing, that disturbance, is like we're not seeing a being with a soul and of any kind. We know about cartoons like Bugs Bunny. We know he's not a real rabbit. When they start mimicking the humans to really look like humans in paintings or art or in movies, in the holograms, what's going to happen? The kids are going to get a little off balance, which they are now. I think with their gaming, their games are too realistic.
If I can put 2 cents in.
I guess that's it for now.
Thank you. Yes, Setna.
Okay, you mentioned the food dog. In my traditions, we have a thing called ushabti or shawabti. They are statuary. You find them in the tombs, but they were used in life as well. I make them of wax so that they're temporary, as the Tibetans say, so you can put the energy away. They can look like you, they can look like whatever you want them to. The ones I make lately are not looking ancient Egyptian. Some of them have cell phones, some of them have attaché cases, computer, tablets, and they will send the energy to go where you need it to go so that you can do other things too. But they will also protect your home, let people know what's going on with you. They're an investiture of your own energy, but also there's one called a Y, W-I-I, and they're very rare. They are energy that's just in the air, spiritual energy that's walking through, astral, those that have crossed over, or just loose energy. And when I work with my clay or my wax, that energy is there, and it's a spiritual, and it's a living being. You can feel it. People have touched dolls that I've worked with. It sounds scary, but I work a lot with my clay pieces, but I also will invest that energy in statuary or dolls. A friend of mine remarked the other day, sitting in front of my altar, that my statue of Isis head turned to look at me, and he looked twice, and she looked back at him like, yeah, I did that. So that energy, that spiritual energy is there, especially when you have a person like yourself, or if I can be so arrogant like myself, that draws that energy in, and that the deities, the higher forces, want to work with you. So I find that energy is readily available to us if we tap into it. People, as you say, that use witchcraft, negative witchcraft, I'm going to say there is positive and negative.
Yes, there is.
People are using negative energy to hurt people, but what they forget is that energy is going to ricochet and go back on them. So the joke's on them. Be bad now, but pay for it later. Positive energy is always the right way to go, and that is my way. People that know me know that I want to radiate positive energy and love energy, and give back to people what gave me the universe. I've been very blessed in my life, and some things were not so wonderful. But then I found you, and then things got better.
I'm honored that you think so. Thank you.
Oh, I do, most fervently.
Thank you so much, Setna. And last but not least in this round of questioning, Nick Curto. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, first of all, what a wonderful program, and the book. I'm going to get it. I'm going to order it tonight. It just sounds amazing. So that's going to be quite something. I just wanted to go into just a slightly different area for just a moment, which is the watchers, the watching, the monitoring that goes on, and there's so much of that. Many times when I've done some UFO sky watching, and the light that we realized was something that wasn't from this planet, from a huge distance away, and we're observing it, and we're talking about it, and it moves, and it goes right over our heads. It took about a minute to get there, but it knew exactly, or whoever was piloting, that we were there, and they were observing it. We went to Pine Bush, and that happened. We were at Central Park, Cleopatra's Needle, and the three lights that in the sky, these three bright white lights, that turned out to be a triangle of starship of some kind. And we observed it from a distance, and it slowly came towards us. And when it got over us, and there's no way to know how high it was, I assume it was very, very high, it literally stopped right over us for about 25 seconds and then continued. Again, it knew where we were. It was watching us. It knew that we were looking for contact, and it did that. I was talking to Charlie Hall and his wife, who were observing the what he calls the tall white aliens. I was at a conference in Washington, D.C., and he was saying that these tall, beautiful people with children sometimes were walking in the desert, where he was reading weather instruments that he had to do that as part of his job, and that they were housed, they talked to him, and they were housed in a secret area of a military base. And he said, one of the women said something that was so interesting. She said, he was looking at the little beautiful children that were there with her in the desert. And she said, we love our children more than you love yours. And if anything were to happen to our children, we would absolutely kill whoever hurt our child. I mean, wow, what a statement. But how interesting is that he saw many times what he calls the tall whites. Another monitoring would be Val Thor talking about the fact that they had observed us for many years, and they realized that we were in a path to total disaster if we kept on with nuclear and atomic weaponry. And he was sent to talk to our governments and other agencies about stopping this totally right now before we completely obliterated ourselves and our planet. And he was offering us advanced technologies. Again, the observing very closely of us, of our country, of the world, and what was going on with politics and war. These are all examples of watching us, monitoring us. How interesting is that? I just want to throw that into the mix.
Thank you. That is phenomenally interesting, and the whole phenomenon of the contactees resonates with doctrines that were being espoused in antiquity about planetary spirits and things like that. And I find it phenomenally fascinating to compare what the Gnostics and others were saying about the planetary spirits with what is being said about the aliens that are experienced by the contactees, including Balfour.
Absolutely. Do you have one more minute?
Sure.
Just another quick one, a personal thing. I was probably around 11 or 12 years old, and I inadvertently was on a very, very high wall. It was a stone wall, and I didn't realize as I was walking up this wall how the land was going far down, and eventually it was quite. I was high up, and the land, if I had fallen, would have been way down, and I would have been killed. And I lost my balance. I really did lose my balance. I might have stumbled on a stone, but I was about to go over, and I was feeling my body. I couldn't control it, and I felt a loving presence that literally pushed my shoulders back. It wasn't me. It was something that saved me, and it was loving, and it was there. It wasn't me that corrected that. I would have gone over. And so I just wanted to put it in the mix that, again, somehow monitoring, somehow looking, observing, and in some cases interacting. In this particular case, how wonderful. I could tell the story.
That's
So,
their guardian angels.
That is also
Yeah,
Marc shared a
exactly.
story like this at one point with Michael, with the Archangel Michael, and Marc had shared how he was falling backwards and he called out and that something cushioned his fall and made sure that he was intact and unharmed as he
Oh,
was.
me? Mark, me?
Yes, Marc,
Oh,
you.
I was slipped off some 3 steps to our building that you've not seen yet. When you come over, go down to a courtyard. At the top of the stairs, I slipped because it was raining and I had 2 heavy pegs on my both hands with heavy machine metal that we had button making machines that were made of steel. So my feet were in the air. And instantly I called out for Jesus and angels to help me now, my guardians. Instantly. Both sides of my body were captured from my shoulder blades and my thigh by giant hands on both sides, and they levitated me 15 feet over to the front of my door and placed me down. Everything was weightless, and the scent of flowers and incense surrounded me with euphoric bliss. And all I could say out of my mouth was, "Thank you, I love you, thank you, I love you," to Creator. And they put me down, and I was in a bliss state for the next day, all over the place. I should have been dead, broken neck, cracked head, whatever, or on the cement stairs. So yes, they come and help you. They've done that for me many times, our guardians. Just know that they're there and trust they're there and they're going to be helping you, because I've met my guardians physically. And my doorman met one of my guardian angels since she brought back Phyllis's briefcase lost in the taxi cab. So she came at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a special number, as we know. And my doorman said to me, "Marc, I just met an angel. Have you met an angel?" I said, "Well, you met my guardian angel." And she came and described her perfectly. And she was super tall because he's over 6 feet and change. And so I said, "Well, how tall was she?" And he says, "My gosh," I was looking directly in her eyes, not a flaw in her skin, not a wrinkle, not a pore. And her large blue eyes, long blonde hair to her shoulders. And he described her perfectly. So I told him, and she went up the steps. Oh, and she also said to him, and he kept saying, who should I say brought the briefcase back?" And she said, "Angel." And he goes, "Angel or Angela?" She goes, "Angel." Then she goes out the courtyard area. And he says, but when if they do ask me, what should I say? And he said, "Angel or Angela?" And she goes like this. And she points to the sky and says, "An angel from God." Walks up the steps that I almost died on, walks angled and disappears, dematerializes.
Wow.
This is real. It's happened to many people.
I have a story to share. I shared it in one of Tim BECKLEY's books. I think the first one that I actually contributed something to. In Greece, whenever I've been to the island of Limnos, which is where my family is from, that's the island where Jason and the Argonauts landed and the Amazons were there. So just in context, there are some other mythological associations as well. There's near the city of Mudros, there's a shrine. And whenever I was wandering around in the mountains and I stopped at the shrine, there's always a woman dressed in white who comes out and talks to me. And she seems to know everything I've been doing and talks about it. And I talk to her and she seems to know who I am and everything about me. And then she leaves, or I need to leave. And then it dawns on me that this is a very strange thing to be encountering somebody on this barren mountain in the middle of nowhere. And I turn around and there's nowhere to go. There's some olive trees, but nothing else there in the mountain. So she can't run and hide behind a rock or something. And the shrine is very small. It's like a one-room shrine, so she can't hide in there. And it never strikes me as odd that she's there. It never strikes me as odd that she knows all about me and what I'm doing. It never strikes me as odd that she's interacting with me and that it's like this continuous conversation that is taking place over the years. It always strikes me as odd when I realize that she's nowhere in sight and there's no place to go on this like barren mountain on an island in the Aegean Sea. And she looks physical. She looks as physical as any one of us. She's experienced physically. She has identified herself as Hecate, or Hecate, or Hecate, as she's sometimes called in English. And I always perceive her as a young lady in her 20s or 30s wearing white. And Hecate now is viewed as like a crone and sometimes a goddess of witchcraft and so forth. But in her earlier manifestation, she was portrayed as someone younger and with much more positive connotations. So my perception of her has always been as in the ancient way rather than the modern way. But these beings, when we encounter them, including like Men in Black type of beings and other type of entities, they can appear very physical, they can appear very real, and they seem to have some effect on us that sometimes when we're undergoing the experience, there's nothing odd about it. But then afterwards, in retrospect, it seems very, very strange. And we wonder how we didn't catch it. Like this entity has appeared to me very many times, and I fall for it all the time. And it's not until after I say, wait a second, it happened again. It never occurs to me to question the reality of what I'm experiencing while it's occurring. It's only afterwards that I can start questioning things. So there's enough out there for another book, Tim.
Well, you bring up an interesting point there, Hercules, about how, even though it should be, to your perception, this is a strange situation. Here I'm seeing this beautiful woman, out, on this island in the, in these ruins, but you don't think of anything about it at the time. It seems perfectly normal. This is something that happens to a lot of people who have these experiences. And, I'll go back to, the Men in Black, or just, like strange people who come knocking on your door, offering to take photographs of your family, or just, things like that. People often report that they'll just throw their door open and say, yes, come on in, something that they normally would not do, under similar circumstances. And a lot of times it's almost that way with the black-eyed kids. Marc had said that, there are some kids who now are able to get a hold of the full eye black contact lenses, just for a lark, and, go out and scare people. But people know the difference when these things, oftentimes like the black-eyed kids, come knocking at your door. Even though they look like kids, with the exception of their eyes, people often say that they have the feeling that they're in the presence of a predator and that they're going to be eaten. I've heard that several times. But then again, you turn that around with the people who will go and invite the Men in Black in, or, there was in England in the 1980s, there was the media called them phantom social workers. They weren't phantoms at all. They were just normal looking people with clipboards and briefcases who wanted to come into people's houses. Usually these people had newborn babies, or small children. And they claimed to be from like the local government. And they were there to make sure that, the babies were safe and clean. And oftentimes said that, well, this household doesn't stand up and we're going to take the baby with us. And then when, the people would ask for identification, the phantom social workers would immediately leave as quickly as possible. And then later, when they went and called the local agencies, the agencies were like, no, we haven't had anybody, coming by. And despite numerous investigations, nobody was ever caught, or there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason why this was happening. But these people, again, they just would throw their doors open to these strangers. And then afterwards, they'd be like, why did I do that? I have no idea. Normally, I'm very cautious. I would never open my door to strangers. Yet they would open the door, invite them in, try to serve them coffee, things like that. So, it's interesting. And Nick, there was something that you were talking about, the watchers, and a lot of times people who will have a UFO sighting, they will have the feeling while it's going on that the UFO is very well aware of their presence and that it is being watched by them. So then you take that with these others, the mimics who come and visit people. A lot of times these things seem to have intimate knowledge of the person that they're coming to visit. They'll tell them, like where they were born, where they were raised, family secrets that nobody else should know about, even as far as to telling them things that would happen to that's going to happen to them in the future. So, once again, we are left with, are we dealing with physical creatures or paranormal phenomena like you were talking about, Hercules, or maybe all of the above? I'm not going to throw out the possibility that we're dealing with a number of different things, with the similarities being that they either look human or can look human. And that's the other mystery. Why? Why do they look human? All right. It's a big universe out there. And it seems odd to me, especially, when you're talking about the UFO phenomena, that if these are extraterrestrials, the chances of them evolving into looking, that humanoid form, the head, two arms, two legs, that sort of thing, that seems really unlikely. So this humanoid shape is predominant. I mean, that's the main, point of the book. They look like us. Why do they look like us? And that's what we want to know. That's why we're asking. Why are they here? Why do they look like us? Why have they been with us all of this time, taking on different faces, different guises, developing along with us? We no longer believe in fairies or gods or angels any longer. But now, the idea of extraterrestrials visiting us doesn't seem too far-fetched anymore. So now these things have they're disguising themselves, I think, as extraterrestrials for whatever reason. I'm not saying that there aren't actual extraterrestrials visiting us. I think that's a very real possibility, but I think it unlikely that they look that close to us, that they're that human. Val Thor, people like that, why do they look so much like us?
Because they are similar to us. And there's a lot of Nordic types that are actual humans. They're not Nordics. I mean, they look like them because they came from the time of Atlantean times, and they went to space with the crews that we were with. And some went to the planet. So they've come to meet people and they said, we're humans like you because our ancestors were from Atlantis. And we took off in space. So and a lot of aliens out there have humanoid form, a head, two arms, and two legs. Maybe they look like a gray, or maybe they look like a cat person with a tail, or not tail, or a lizard person. So we got, and the one I met in the Park Valathon, he was on the ships above, but he came in a human form, not the way he actually appears on the ships, but pretty close enough that when I saw him, I knew there was something off. He had very large eyes, perfect teeth, perfect skin, not a pore, not a wrinkle on him. And I actually was saying telepathically, is this an angel or an extraterrestrial in my head? And he spoke to me with telepathy plus with his mouth. So when he got up, I shook his hand. He was about 7 feet tall, just about. And he walked away, and very slowly, because he was like walking through dimensional plane, feeling like mud and cement. This is the way I know they experienced some of that, if they're not normally coming through and coming in. But as he went, no one saw him, and no dogs saw him as he walked by. They didn't even look. Yet I shook his hand, and he was solid with me. So this is the Etherian, high Etherians. When they come in, they come from a higher plane. They come into the dimensional planes of the etheric levels, and then they come in with a body form. But if they're new at doing it, they're very slow walking with it. It's like mud. But as soon as he was gone, he went around a corner down on 85th Street. Nick knows where it was, and dematerialized as he went by trees and branches. I was watching him, he dematerialized. And then that day, I was teleported on the spaceship as well, above Central Park. So they are human-like, not all human, though. They look human, but humanoid-like, I will say. I've also encountered on the ships the robotic type people, not like Data or any of that, but they do make a robotic type that is very helpful. But it's not real. You just know it. It's like a computer walking around, but it acts like Data, like it looks like a real person. So I've seen those too on the ships, but they're rare. They don't use those a lot, but they do create them for going to different missions and different planets on physical realms. But just like Earth would do, they probably mimic a robot. And we got clones today, right? So even the clones are strange, right? Everybody who's seen one, has anybody seen a clone?
Yes, of course.
Okay. There's an energy with it, right, Michael? That's not like ours.
They're more like mannequins.
They're what?
They're more like mannequins.
Mannequin, exactly.
They don't exactly, they look human, but not exactly human.
Yeah.
There's something missing, or
See him in New York.
And since
I beg your pardon.
planets have been named after the Olympians in their Roman names and a lot of the constellations too, so that identification with the gods of ancient Greece to the celestial realms is very old indeed. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. So I'd like everybody to say farewell, leave some parting thoughts, and also contact information. We'll start with Nick. Nick Curto has several shows on our Mount Olympus channel. He has Disclosure Network, the Urantia book, The Creative Process, and Sword and Sandal Cinema. He does specials, and he's also a frequent guest on some of our other shows. So Nick, we'll start with you.
Oh, thank you, Hercules. Just want to give my email address, and if anybody has a question or a comment, I'd be happy to take that. NICKNYNY1, and that's the numeral 1 at gmail.com. Again, NICKNYNY1 at gmail.com. The Disclosure Network New York is dnny.info, and you get a lot of information there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next to Setna of Khemet, aka Michael Waterman. Michael has a show called Conwest Speaks, and he also has an episode of Sword and Sandal Cinema, where we explore the myths of our time, the myths that we grew up with on television and in the movies. And he's also a frequent guest on several of our other shows. So the baton goes to you, Setna.
I'm all set, ready when you are. I have this, which is cool. You can't really see it. I am MK Waterman at iCloud.com. You can get me on Facebook at Michael K. Waterman. You can also get me at Phono Wizard, which is my business that I have. You can get me on my email address I just gave you, and my phone number, 516-650-3691. And of course, you can reach me through Hercules and his many, many adventures and such. And I'm always glad to do that. And I look forward to speaking to all of you soon.
Thank you very much. And of course, Nick and Setna are part of this show, the the UFO entity Enigma, as is Marc Brinkerhoff. And Phyllis, I guess, remained silent today. We missed you, Phyllis. And Marc and Phyllis also have another show called the ET Universal Zone. So would you care to share your contact info, Marc?
Okay, that was Phyllis, but I had muted us. She said, I'm here today, I'm listening. We got the main website is intergalacticmission.com. Then the next one is etuniversalzone.com, where you can hear all of our podcasts and archives and messages going on. They have Marc Brinkerhoff, that's MarcBrinkerhoff.com. That's my art website with animals and everything. And we have Facebook, Marc Brinkerhoff of Facebook. We have YouTube, and we have another website, but we have it off right now, fairyreality.com, because they are real. I got them in the house, they're right behind me. I've taken photos of them. So, and they appear physically to me and Phyllis. That's about it, right? Oh, no, can you reach us as Marc Brinkerhoff at yahoo.com. That's my email on those sites.
Thank you so very much. Paul Del Roberts is new to our company, but I will be inviting him back because I was impressed by his input today. So how can people reach you, Paul?
They can actually go to my website at cryptic916.com. That's CRYPTIC916.com. I have a paranormal hotline. I cover Northern California, and that's 916-203-7503. And I'm very easy to find because all you have to do is just Google Paul Dale Roberts. But I also, too, the viewers out there, if you don't know what Tim's book looks like, it looks like this. I love the cover. It jumps right off the shelves. So, yeah, definitely get this book. And I just want to mention Slender Man is an entity that is also too a tulpa, because people thought of Slender Man so much, and he manifested because now people are encountering Slender Man. And thank you for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for being on. And yes, I made somebody up once when I was doing some science fiction fandom activity. I made up somebody who conspiracy theory style was behind science fiction fandom, pulling the invisible strings. And I would write things by him or about him occasionally and hint about him. And within a year and a half, people were having experiences of this make-believe person and reporting them. And it was very, very spooky and very, very interesting. And perhaps on another day when we talk about tulpas some more, I'll share more information. Thank you very much. And last but not least, the one, the only Tim Swartz, who it's always a pleasure to have him on. And thank you, Tim, for your time and for all your efforts. How can people contact you and tap into Zontar Press?
Well, sure, Hercules. You can find this book, Mimics the Others Among Us. Right now, it's on Amazon.com as both a print and ebook, and you should be able to also find it at your favorite local bookstores. You'll probably have to ask them to order it for you, but you know, if you get the book and you like it, please leave us a good review, because you know, myself, Sean Castile, Hercules, Scott Corrales, Paul Dale Roberts, I mean, you know, we put a lot of effort into this book, a lot of research, and we just really want people to enjoy it and to let other people know that it's out there. And my website is conspiracyjournal.com. And I always like to say, we have all the weird news and information that they don't want you to know.
And I mentioned before, I don't remember if it was on the air or off the air, I have put together a group in northeastern New Jersey, and we've been meeting once a month, sometimes twice a month. And I'm putting together a must-read list for the group. And Mimics has made its way to that list. And I look forward to exploring it further and discussing it with that group. And maybe we'll have a future episode where we revisit it. And I want to thank everybody tonight for being here. This was an awesome program. I wasn't feeling well at the beginning of it, but I feel wonderful now, and I want to thank all of you for it. You distracted me from my illness or ailments, and now I'm all caught up in the conversation. I'm feeling stoked. So thank you so very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
You're welcome, Hercules. Blessings.
Yes. Thank you, Hercules. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks all.
Bye.